All right, in this video, we're going to talk about integrating powers of the secant function. So integrals that look like this. Integral of the secant of n to some positive integer power there. If n equals 1, right, it's to the first power, then that one is a substitution integral, although a little bit complicated. But we did that in the substitution, integration by substitution section, and this is one that you need to memorize. The integral of secant is natural log absolute value of secant x plus tangent x plus some constant c. All right, next up, secant squared. That's a ridiculously easy one, right? The integral of that is just tan. Okay, secant cubed, right? Secant cubed really deserves its own video. In this video, I'm not going to go through how this is derived, but this is one that is complicated enough that you need to memorize it. This, you might think that this is obscure and doesn't occur a lot, but for some reason it just seems to pop up in the oddest of places. This integral right here. So you need to memorize this one for this class because it will come up in, like I said, places where you don't think it would come up. So again, I'm not going to go through the steps of how to do this, but you would use integration by parts, and this one is a repeater, just like e to the x cosine x or e to the x sine x, and you would go through it that way. So my advice, and I guess I'm just going to say that I'm going to require you to memorize this one. It will come up. It's on the test. I'll expect that you know this. So, all right, just like for tangents, there is some reduction formula for powers of secant. You can see it's slightly more complicated than the one for tangent. Again, you do not need to memorize this. I just want you to be aware of its existence, and if you ever have to use it, you've at least seen one example of how it would go. So again, let's say we want to integrate secant to the fourth power. So we would apply the reduction formula. In this case, n would be equal to 4, right? So we'd have secant to the fourth is tangent times secant squared, right, over 4 minus 1, which is 3, and then plus 4 minus 2, and 4 minus 1, which is 3, and then secant to the 4 minus 2 secant squared power. So, and of course, so again, just like with tangent, this knocks down the power on the secant that you have to integrate. So if you had a really high power of secant that you needed integrated, right, you could repeatedly apply this reduction formula over and over again and eventually knock down the power to something that's easy to integrate. So, and so secant squared, right, that just integrates to tan, and so that's it for this one. So just recapping the powers of secant. The integral of secant is natural log absolute value of secant x plus tangent x. You need to memorize this one. Secant squared, you should already have this one memorized. Secant cubed, you need to memorize this one. Like I said, this one is complicated enough to where it's worth it to memorize it, and it comes up enough in practice, right, that also makes it worth it. So memorize all three of these guys right here, and then for higher powers, it is always possible to use the reduction formula. Again, you do not have to memorize this one. Just be aware that, yes, there is some formula out there that will take high powers of secant and break them down to integrals of lower powers of secant. And that's pretty much it for the powers of secant.